Hello, welcome to another one of Pat's Chats with From Out of the Basement. I'm, of course, Patrick Gleason, and tonight I'm joined by Marc Michaud. How are you doing, Marc?
Great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's should I say Marc Michaud or do you prefer Mark?
When I'm speaking in English, Mark is
Okay,
perfect.
because I was seeing that they put you as a Franco-Albertan.
Yeah, that's my own kind of label, I suppose. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. Well, where did you come up with that sort of idea that?
Well, it's because it describes what I am. I was born and raised north of Edmonton in a small francophone village. My parents, we spoke French at home.
Mm.
So it was kind of, yeah, it's always been present in my life. And then so I moved to Quebec. It's been a while now, over 20 years, but I still feel somewhat like an outsider, even though I speak French fluently and I'm able to converse and everything. I still feel Franco-Albertan. I don't feel like a Quebecois.
You don't speak the. Yeah, I was gonna say you don't speak the Gatineau Quebecois probably there.
Not exactly, no.
On the screen here, you're seeing Home, which is by you and your brother. Your first issue of Home, correct? That you and your brother did?
Yeah.
What got you started with comics? I mean, obviously you read comics as a kid, but what got you into it and wanting to draw?
To be honest, it was something that we've kind of been doing our whole lives. Like I can't think of a time when I started drawing. It was just kind of always present. Comics came in really early on. First, actually, was my mom buying just Archie double digest comics that would just sit around the house, and
Mhm.
that was kind of really my first exposure to comic books. And then eventually superheroes, Marvel and DC and all that stuff as a young kid. And so my brother and I, both of us would just copy the comics that we were buying, right? Just drawing pages out of it. The goal was always to draw comics, but it was a long path to get here. Like in my mind, I always imagined myself drawing Marvel comics or superhero book,
Mhm.
and then yeah, just a change in everything as you grow and develop as a person, taste change or whatever it is. So I end up towards the science fiction, independent, black and white,
Mhm.
much smaller scale stories, stuff like that, but still comics. And actually, the reason that I moved to Quebec was to study the graphic. There's a comic book program here at the University of Quebec
Oh,
where they teach illustration, storytelling, the fundamentals of comic book illustration. So that was why I moved here, and then didn't complete the program, not because I didn't enjoy it, but because I was paying extra fees as a
oh, because
foreign
you're out of
student and
yeah,
stuff. So
out of
long story
province.
short, yeah, exactly right. So long story short, I appreciated the year that I did. I still remain in contact with the professors from the program and stuff. It's really actually pretty cool, and we ended up just staying because we like the area.
Nice. Well, hopefully they'll give you an honorary degree at some point in time when they see your work.
Yeah, or like a guest speaker, or yeah,
Mhm.
something. Yeah, sure, why
Yeah,
not?
or teach, be able to teach once in a while, so that'd be good. So, what got you onto the futuristic sort of point of view for Home? Because I know, like you and your brother share the comic.
Right.
You write one part, he writes. Well, sorry, you guys do one part, he does the other part,
Yeah.
and then you put it together and print it out. Now, do you self-publish as well? Like, is this been all by you guys, or?
Uh, No, we're working with a publisher out of Toronto, New Friday. They're also Chapter House. They published Chapter House would be kind of their a superhero branch. They published the Captain Canuck universe of superheroes,
Mhm.
and then New Friday, which is where they publish us, is their creator-owned branch. So the books under that umbrella are all owned by the creators. The IP is owned by us, and actually, that also is a circuitous path because the book one actually was published in Malaysia first before ever coming out in Canada. I lived over there for a couple of years. I met a publisher over there who I showed him my stuff. He put it
Mhm.
out over there, and then I used that copy of the book to find a publisher here in Canada.
Oh, nice. What was it like
Yeah,
being in Malaysia, trying to do like I imagine it was an English comic still then?
yeah, yeah.
How
I
was
mean,
that?
it, it was really interesting. Like it happened just really by coincidence. At a shopping center one day, there was an independent book fair, and one stall was selling comics. So I just kind of started talking with the guy at the stall, who also happened to be the main editor. It's a small, independent publisher out there. And yeah, we just kind of got to talking. I explained to him kind of my situation, that we were actually moving back to Canada shortly after, but that I draw comics, etc. And I showed him my stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, I'd be interested in publishing it here." I couldn't think of any reasons why not to, so
if someone's like,
jumped on
they'll
board.
publish, you're like, sure, here you go.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And
Now
then, of
you're up.
course, they helped us get the publisher here in Canada. So,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Now, do they still publish? Like, because I believe you're up to number 3, correct? I believe.
Yeah, no, they stopped publishing after number 1 partly because we weren't in Malaysia, so it made things like promotion and all of these types of things complicated. And yeah, it wasn't like a huge seller for them. The financial incentive wasn't strong enough for them to keep going.
Okay.
So, and that's fair enough. I still am, forever indebted to them for even taking the chance the first time. So,
well, that's really good. That's, and like I said, just because you had a conversation with the guy at one time, they got you going. Are you doing plans to do it in French as well? Because I didn't see on your site if there's the French versions as well, or.
Again, a complicated answer. So initially, my first version of the books were done in French. Now I don't feel comfortable writing, especially dialogue in French, because it's so nuanced. For it to feel natural, so I was hiring a translator to translate it to French for me, and I initially kind of shopped it to publishers in Quebec. And there was one that was interested, and it fell through. But anyway, that was my initial goal, was to try and sell it within Quebec to a Quebecois publisher. I thought that was my easiest access to having a book out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ended up moving to Malaysia. That whole thing happened. I came back with a book in English. So, and for me, it's easier. This is how I write in English, and then I'm not paying a translator. But the dream would be, yeah, absolutely, to have it available in French in Quebec here. I would love it. I'm hoping that one of the local publishers, wakes up.
There. Now, your brother it's still in Edmonton area, is that correct? I believe you said, or
no, he's up north of Montreal. I have a
okay.
brother that's still in Alberta, but the one that I work with for the comic is in Rawdon, which is north of Montreal, about an hour north of Montreal, in the woods there. No.
Oh, so
we do most of our work is done over the internet, over the phone, things like this.
Yeah. How was it? I was gonna say, how was that for internet in Malaysia? Like, because obviously it's not as high advanced here for sending files and stuff like that for getting things published, or was it?
It's not so bad. Malaysia is, especially Kuala Lumpur, is a very, very, very modern city. Everything is as tip top as you could imagine it to be here. So for transfer files, all that stuff was no problem. The biggest issue really between Daniel and I was just that there was a 12-hour difference. So it's getting on the same page to talk or whatever it is just gets more complicated. But other than that, it wasn't so bad.
Now that you're with Chapter House, have you sort of said, "Hey guys, can I work on some of your superhero stuff? Because I got a comic book. Look."
Not really. Like I just I'm so just kind of focused and taken by this project. It really does take up all of my creative energy to do this. So I'm just happy to keep kind of working on my little path here and keep going, try to build up, in my mind, the way that it works is, as you amass a story and a collection of volumes on the shelf, it attracts people. They'll see something and something must be going on here for it to continue like this. So that's kind of the goal, is to just keep putting something out. Ideally, a book a year or something close to that would be the goal. Yeah.
The goal, that'd be good. I started reading it. So it's interesting because you're basically just having 2 characters on the ship. It's most of these interactions. So what made you decide that you wanted to keep it like super small, like just 2 people for dialogue, and that, as opposed to try and do the, this futuristic stuff where you're meeting all these different aliens back and forth? And
well, the initial part of it was part of it being that it's my first real big story that I was telling, so I wanted to kind of keep the scale smaller. So that's part of it. As you go from book one into book two and three and four, you'll see that the scale really does amp up. The cast of characters, everything does increase. But for that first book, it was kind of intentional to keep it small, to make it intentionally easier for me to manage as an artist. Initially, I always kind of thought of myself as an artist. Coming to the writing side of it has been more of by accident or by circumstance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of a way to keep that simpler and keep it in check. And then as I gain experience, I can kind of expand that vision.
What were some of the movie influences that you feel like you brought into your writing and your art?
Well, I think it's impossible to avoid like the Star Wars and Star Trek and all of these types of things. The kind of stuff that's maybe a little bit more off is like a Little House on the Prairie, which maybe you're not expecting in a science fiction type of an environment or something like this, where it's like, I both of us are really trying to keep the stories very personal, and then especially it'll become more apparent in Daniel's story as we progress into the colonization of the planet and all this stuff, how it really becomes almost like pioneer stories, like a way to tell the stories of what our ancestors might have experienced 200 years ago in this difficult environment or something like this, so that was some of the influences. Other than that, I'm trying to think. It's kind of everything, right? It's hard to not just take a little bit of whatever it is that you're enjoying. So as a kid, Star Wars was the biggest one for sure.
I do like
telling those types of big intergalactic stories, though. That's where the difference really happens, is that I'm not interested in telling these kind of like end of the world type of stories. It's much more personal and
well, I was watching, like I said, reading when he's grown up there, where he's building things by hand, and that's what I learned. Sort of reminded me a little bit of some of that, like, well, Firefly and that. For a while there's that, the pioneer, the science fiction, but pioneer, because they're saying, it's easier to have low technology when you're doing a colony than high technology, because you don't have to worry about trying to find replacement parts or anything. So, livestock and building things by hand makes sense, right? I don't know if you ever do you see Firefly?
Of course, actually, Firefly would be another one that. Yeah, that's another one that would be an influence I didn't mention. But yeah, of course, Firefly, even further than that, has the same kind of like, and that's accidental, but they have a bit of a Western flair. I would say mine has more of like a rural flair, not so much Western, but like rural, farmland type of thing.
Well, you said Little House on the Prairie in space.
Right.
But no, I did get that, where it's like it makes sense that that's how he learned. He built things by hand, and I do like some of your things that you threw in there, the golfing outfits and all that. That was a nice little interesting thing. If there's a golf course on their ship.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea for that? I mean, that
was just like the idea was actually just kind of the idea for the ship came first, and I had this the concept of the secondary greenhouse, and I was trying to think of something that could be a pastime that could have been introduced after the fact. Like, it wouldn't be part of the original design, but somebody might have introduced it afterwards. And so kind of golf came to me as an idea. And my brothers and my dad at the time, they all played golf and enjoyed it. I hated it. I really didn't like the game. And then as I started drawing it, and I started doing some research into how, just to be able to draw it properly and all of these things, I was looking into it, and I came out the other side. I love the game now. I really enjoy playing. I'm not very good, but I really do enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay, so you were Patrick at the beginning, who's like, "This is a stupid waste of time. I don't understand it."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then I spent a bunch of time drawing it, looking at these different books teaching you how to do it. So as I was doing it, I was actually learning myself. I'm like, oh, okay, this is why my swing was so terrible. This is why I was, always slicing or whatever. And I was able to kind of correct my game as I was learning to draw it and stuff. So it was yeah, so I guess it's kind of like a neat tidbit that it wasn't I didn't include it because I loved it. I started to love it because I included it.
Well,
You know?
that's actually pretty interesting though, that you learned to like the game from learning how to draw it. That's actually pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah.
Now, you said you wanted to start like originally with Marvel, because I mean, imagine that's most comic book. Anyone who's ever drawn superheroes is Marvel or DC. Did you prefer Marvel or DC, or the Image Comics when it came out?
I was actually kind of split down the middle. I was really big into the X-Men,
Hmm.
but I also was collecting Batman comics. So I was, you know, kind of dipping my feet in both. And then when Image came along, I was in, yeah, 100%. Image is probably the thing that influenced me the most in basically this idea that I can tell my story.
Hmm.
I don't have to necessarily go work on somebody else's characters and somebody else's universe. I can do it on my own, and that's actually probably the biggest influence as a young kid. Anyway, um, it was that image revolution, which it really was a revolution.
Oh,
It
it
really
was, yes.
changed the way that people thought about create their own stuff. Yeah,
And it was finally due too. It was like, yes, if I create it, it's mine. Like you can publish
yeah,
it, but it's still my character, my world, my stuff. Whereas at Marvel or DC is like, no, no, that's our character now. Yeah.
yeah.
Now,
Of
have you
course.
thought perhaps any animation, like short little animated shorts on YouTube and that for Arc 29 or?
I mean, if somebody approached me to do it, I would have no problem. It's not something that I'm necessarily going out of my way looking for, but my intent is always to try and tell a story first. If I can first tell that story well as a comic, if it can work as an animation or as a short film or anything else afterwards, that's perfect. I have no problem with it. But my intent is really first to make sure that I have a comic that stands on its own, works, and yeah, can be read. Yeah.
How hard was it getting through the dialogue? Because you said you were originally, artist first, and then writer sort of came along later. So how hard was it trying to learn to do the dialogue where you're like, look, other people look at it and go, that makes sense or that works?
Uh, it remains, I would say, my biggest struggle is to make sure that you're telling everything that you want to tell enough that the reader understands everything that they need to understand, but not so much that you're over delivering or over yeah, too much dialogue can throw people off. If you open a page and you're stared at a bunch of text, sometimes people just will put a book down because there's just too much going on in terms of dialogue. So yeah, it's really like kind of that delicate dance, and I feel like that's where I'm still learning the most. I guess is really trying to figure out what stays, what doesn't.
Hmm.
Am I saying enough? Those types of things. So yeah, if you say it works in the first book, then I'll take that as a compliment. That's good, and I'm working on getting better at it as I go along because yeah, it's definitely for me the hardest part.
So have you ever looked back on some of your really early work and gone, oh my God, what was I right? What was I thinking when I wrote that dialogue?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Although I would say it's again, this probably reflects more on me as an artist than as a writer. Is that I tend to go back and look at the drawings and really only see the mistakes, the things that I would want to redraw,
Hmm.
much more so than the things that I would want to rewrite,
Yeah.
are things that I would want to draw over again, or just correct or move things around or whatever it is. But yeah, I think I'm much more hung up on the visual side of it than on the textual side. Yeah.
So speaking of that, because like I said, there's certain artists, like one guy I was talking to yesterday, earlier this week, Ron. He said he has problems drawing like cars and motorcycles, and I know other people are famous for not being able to draw feet. So is there anything that you were like struggling for to be able to get the design and draw properly? You're sort of.
I think that where I feel like I struggle is drawing uh, like pretty women. Like it's tricky. You always are trying to keep to a minimum the amount of lines that you're putting on a page or things like this. And I feel that especially when drawing women, you're trying to keep it to an extreme minimum, and it gets hard. I find it tricky. That's other than that, I just try and find good reference materials. Like I feel like if I have good reference materials, I can more or less, wrestle a drawing out of most things. That's how I feel. But sometimes finding that reference is not the easiest though.
So speaking of lines on the page, do you remember this comic called Gru?
Yeah.
So like he had the style where he basically take just on one page, draw everything with one line, sort of. I cannot believe he did that. Did you ever
Yeah,
try to just copy his style for like just to say, hey, you're gonna try it?
not really. I mean, it's so far outside of the kind of work that I do, but it just feels so natural when you look at what he does. It just feels like it's just flowing off at the end of his pen, and like that there's no hesitation or struggle or anything. He just seems to whip it up. But yeah, no, that cartoony style. Yeah, no, it's not really something that I've done a lot of. No.
Is there any like how money like well, I know obviously the answer would be as long as people buy it, but do you have an end game for home? Like some other artists have said, or the writers have said, okay, I want so many story, this is my overarching story. It's going to last for so long, and then we'll find a way to end it. Or do you want to do the I'll just keep
Not really. Like the way that I see it, the way that I'm kind of approaching it is like I'm trying to make every book be a complete book, ideally with enough questions that the reader will want to come back for more or whatever. But the idea being that each book is complete and um, obviously connected. But this is my life's work. I could potentially just keep working in this universe forever. Like I'll just keep
yeah.
making them as long as and if Chapter House stops putting them out, then I'll probably just start putting them out myself. Like it's just this is. I feel like it's the work that I was meant to do, so I'm just going to keep doing it.
Oh, good. Because I met you at the Capital Comic Book Convention. Do you go to do any
Yeah.
other like comic book conventions or the Comic Cons and that or?
Locally, I do. There's one here in Gatineau. That's actually coming up in a couple of weeks on December 2nd at the Maison du Citoyen here at the town hall in Gatineau. They have a 2-day festival of comics. So I do that one.
Okay.
It's predominantly French, but there are a couple of English stands every year, and I do that one. I try to get into Toronto's TCAF every year if I can, and that's usually in May. And then I do one in Montreal. I haven't done any Comic Cons yet. I'm just not sure how independent comics, new creator, new books. I just don't know how it will do because I feel like it's more of a pop culture convention, and since it's not a known property, I'm not sure how. I haven't done it yet. That's all. Yeah.
Well, like you said, it's also, I guess, getting known through the different other convention, smaller ones, and also, people recognizing your work as and that slowly getting out there. Have you? I have the.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully, if you don't have to answer, if you don't want to, but hopefully, have the sales improved from number 1 to number 3?
Well, number 3 is only just being solicited now, and you know what? I don't even really have numbers. All I know is that we sold the first print run of book 1, and we're almost out of the print run of book 2. So the sales are enough that they're going to keep printing them, keeping them in circulation. So I can't really give you an answer more than that. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's like I said, as long as if they're sold out, that's always a good sign.
Yeah.
Do you bring those into like local bookstores and stuff like that? Like not the Indigo, but I mean Indigo would be great if you have it there, but just also the smaller bookstores that are still around.
I haven't. I've gone to the comic book shop, like the one that's on Bank Street, and they have them there. They keep them in in stock in the store there. As for like Indigo and stuff, it is available. I mean, you can order it through the Indigo websites and through Amazon and all these different places. So I mean, technically, it's in their system. I doubt that they keep it in a physical location, but you never know.
Well,
I
don't
should
worry.
maybe go in and say, you know, as a local artist, it might be worth it for you to keep it in stock or something.
Mhm.
It's not a bad idea. I should be taking notes.
Well, don't worry. Also, there'll be for everyone who's watching. There'll be the links are in below in description. For you know Amazon or Indigo and all that. They'll be in the links there, so you can order that online if you want to. I know that this is another one that people ask: is it available as a PDF only, or is it only like is it still only print?
It's available digitally through some. I believe it's available digitally through like possibly Kindle, and then also on. I think it's called Global Comics is the name of the app.
Okay.
I don't use it, but on Global Comics, and as far as I know, it exists as a digital version for through the Amazon system as well.
Okay.
As far as I know.
It's just because I know some people prefer digital versus the print.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays when it's like, okay, I don't have enough space for all of the books and comics and everything I want, but I want to still be able to read new stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, I'll make a note. I'll double check to make sure that they have it in. But I'm pretty sure that it exists as a PDF format. I know that it's on Global Comics as in part of their like ecosystem.
Mhm.
I'm not exactly sure how that works for distribution, but yeah.
Well, that's all right. That's okay as long as it's out there. Well, like I said, I'll dig around and try and find some of the links, and they'll be if I find the links, people, they're in the description. If there's no links, I couldn't find the proper one.
Sure, and I'll try and dig some up for you too, and I'll send them to you.
No worries. So I don't know if I'll be able to get no one, but good luck at the Gatineau one. Now, for movies when you're growing up, what movies influenced you for the science? Well, obviously you could say the Star Wars ones, but are they sort of like a weird independent one that you went, hey, I love this, and you try to get other people to watch it?
I'm not sure about getting other people to watch it, but like I'm pretty heavily influenced. It doesn't maybe show up so much in the first book. It comes more into the later ones, but like David Lynch and this type of kind of like dream-like, where things are kind of blurry between what's a dream and what's really happening.
Yeah, like video
That's something
drawn.
that for sure comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Um,
Existence there or whatever there.
Oh, that's David Cronenberg one. Yeah, that's
Cronenberg.
another
Sorry,
one where
David
it's
Cronenberg. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's a great example too. I really like David Cronenberg stuff as well. So yeah, and then as far as like I guess also like Sam Raimi's stuff, like Army of Darkness was I really love Army of Darkness and the Evil Dead kind of universe and that kind of stuff. But yeah, in terms of influences, I think it really comes down to just those initial Star Trek, Star Wars, this idea of the infinite universe and being able to go out there and do whatever. And then as an independent creator to basically be able to do that and have my own universe and do that.
And also, like for a lot of the Star Trek, it was more very personal. Some of the earlier ones were very personal stories, so it wasn't again this over
about
the
characters, character growth.
That's good. Now I have a strange question for you. Do you consider Die Hard and or Lethal Weapon a Christmas movie?
Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Lethal Weapon, I kind of forget it's been a long time since I've seen it. I don't really remember the connection to Christmas, but for me, Die Hard is
it's definitely because Lethal
a
Weapon
Christmas
starts
movie.
off with a Christmas song. It's taking place at Christmas. There's Christmas trees everywhere. Riggs gets a new family, sort of, at the end.
Then it qualifies. If you're seeing Christmas decorations throughout the movie, and it's part of the world that this story is being told, yeah, I think that qualifies. For sure, Die Hard.
Die Hard, yes,
using the same criteria is the same thing. Yeah.
Is there a movie that or you can watch like year after year and just sort of pull it out and go, even though you know the dialogue, you know what happens, you're still like, I don't mind, I'm gonna throw it in and watch it again.
Yeah, it's probably Army of Darkness. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Groovy.
It just gives it just like I smile through the whole thing. I just feel like it just is yeah. Maybe I watched it at a really formative time. I'm not sure, but there's just something in that movie that comes and yeah, it feels good.
Did you ever watch the series, the TV series?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So now,
Like I said, I haven't read any of the comics though. Or played the video games. I'm more
Mhm.
just I guess the screen aspects of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really like the character of Ash and that whole universe and everything. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay. Have you tried doing like like I know home's keeping you busy, but have you tried it like a sort of your own version of like a horror type idea for
Uh,
comic?
Actually, I did a horror comic just last year. It was for like a zine that was put together by another comic book artist. So it was a tribute to, speaking of David Cronenberg earlier, it was the zine was a tribute to David Cronenberg's work. And so we were free to do whatever we wanted. So I wrote and drew like an 8-page short story, um, just inspired, really heavily inspired by The Fly, and then kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
taking my own little twist on it. So
Nice.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
remember
So, but
oh, do you remember what the zine was called?
yeah, I'll give you the link. It's called Murdered Futures.
Okay, perfect.
And yeah, it's got a bunch of really cool artists and writers that did little, either drawings or stories or whatever in there. But yeah, same thing. I'll send you a link for
Perfect, yeah.
where it can be found online. Find that
So
for you.
is there any plans for more of that sort of collaboration work with other artists that you have on the go or
I'm always open to it. Like currently the project that I kind of have going is that I kind of seek out artists that I like and who have ideally have read my work or whatever, and then I reach out to them for a pinup,
Mhm.
and then I get them to do it in two colors, usually black and a single spot color, and then I make screen prints. Just here in my basement, I have like a two-color screen print operation,
Yeah.
and I just make little posters with these drawings, with guest artists drawing scenes out of my books or whatever. So it's like kind of a collaborative project that I'm doing on a larger scale. But in terms of like drawing other stories or collaborating on anthologies or anything like that, I guess I'm always open to it if it comes up. This one, the Cronenberg one, just kind of came up randomly, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got a kind of a window on my schedule. I'll do something. So it's just yeah, just something that showed up, and I was inspired. So yeah.
Now, I know, like you said, home is black and white. Do you prefer working in black and white, or do you ever have plans to, turn home into, a color, as you say, the four color story?
If it went to full color, I have no problem with it. I would love to see it in full color, but I would hire that out. I can do color. I mean, I painted, I do paintings and I do all this stuff, but I just don't feel necessarily comfortable in the digital coloring for comics and all this stuff. And I just feel that it would take up so much time. And in terms of drawing, yeah, I really love drawing black and white. Like it's really, yeah, that's how I draw. I don't really draw, at least for comics, in color. When I'm
Mhm.
painting, yeah, no problem. But yeah.
So have you sold any of your paintings and that? Like, is there some Marc Michaud paintings out there we
Well,
should keep an eye
uh, not really painting, more murals. Like my brother and I in our hometown back in Alberta, the name of the town is Legal, spelled like legal.
on? Okay. Hmm.
And so there was a project locally, a project to have historical murals depicting the history of the town, the local families, etc. And I think we must have painted 12 of them by now, something like that.
Wow,
So
nice.
if you walk around that town, there's a bunch of our murals around. So, but no, other than that, most of my yeah, most of my artwork just piles up here in my studio, and nobody ever sees it
So
other than the
speaking,
comment.
yeah. So growing up in the Gal, were you and your brother, did you guys tag buildings then? Did you guys were you guys known as the graffiti brothers, or were you actually, nice and
No,
legitimately?
no graffiti. We just like we weren't even growing up in town. We grew up on a farm actually, so that shows up in the stories as well. Like I
Mhm,
think that environment just is something that's unavoidable.
mhm.
No, we were just you know quiet kids at home, hunched over our drawing pads, just like drawing
Yeah.
all the time.
And I guess it's good though that your brother and you were giving each other the positive, feedback and that to help you guys both grow together.
Oh, and that's ongoing. That's still something that's like I still will send my pencil page to Daniel, just like a digital version of it, and he'll give me his notes. I'll make corrections based on it, and vice versa. I mean, the end goal is always to try and make the best product possible, right?
Mhm.
And to have somebody so close who I grew up with, whose opinion I can trust, is invaluable, really. So yeah, it's a great kind of fortunate situation to be in.
Does for Chapter House, do they have an editor for you or
Yeah, so far, I mean, the editorial voice up to this point has really just been correcting like spelling mistakes or grammar, things like this, like sentence structure. There hasn't really been any sort of like the story doesn't make sense or you have to change this because of something, or there hasn't been any sort of like real editorial input. That's so far at least been down to Daniel and I working off of each other.
that which is good. I mean, it's a good sign then if they're basically just like minor little corrections. That's usually a good sign for an artist. That's like, yeah, we like what you're doing. Keep it coming.
Yeah, yeah. So far, so good. Yeah.
I don't. There's. I'm just going to ask another question here randomly. Did you ever read the comic series called Alien Legion? It was by Epic
No, but
Comics.
I remember the covers. I remember the logo, but no, I never did read it.
Yeah,
No, it was good. I should look out for it.
yeah. It was interesting because it was basically. So imagine the French Foreign Legion, but in as intergalactic. As a galactic force. So you'd
Okay.
have, all sorts of
Yeah, yeah.
riff-raffs and all that thrown together in different situations.
So
And
as a
they're
team of mixed individuals from
mixed,
different
yeah, different
whatever
alien races
backgrounds
and
and
like
stuff. Yeah.
different alien races, different backgrounds. Some people are not as friendly as others because again, it was either jail or execution, or join the Legion.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
so
that
that's
sounds
just what,
interesting. Yeah. I'll have to.
yeah.
It's another one of these holes in my reading resume. I'll have to go to the library or something and find a copy or yeah, see if I can track it down.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I wish I could draw, but I love reading as much all sorts of different comics that I can get my hands on. And that it just, I don't know about you, but you run out of time after a while. You're just like, okay, you know,
Absolutely.
you do all this sort of
And
stuff, and you're like,
there's so much good stuff out there.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's impossible to keep up with all of it, of course.
And I
I've
think
got a reading pile that's like this.
yeah, I think the technology and internet has helped that a lot as well for people to publish their own art and get it out there and their own stories. Whereas before, you had to go to certain publishers, and if they didn't like it, you're not being published at all. And then if you self-publish, no one
Yeah,
knew
like
about
the
you.
gatekeepers are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like there's a lot less gatekeeping. You're able to share more instantly with and find your community, find your audience or whatever. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for sure.
And also like I know like you're right, the Comic Cons are more of a sort of the bigger guys with it is conventions sort of things for the cosplay and all that. But I also think it's helped a lot. I'm older. When I was a kid, people look at you funny for reading comics or and stuff like that. Nowadays, it's like, oh wow, yeah, I've read that too. Like people you would never expect who've read comics or interested in geek movies. Now they're like, oh, I'm going to
Mm.
San Diego, and I think that's a really great aspect for you when you're growing up in small town in Nagal, Alberta. I guess it must have been harder for you too as well to try and get books and other people that had your interest?
Yeah, well, basically, like the only comics that we could get at the time were, the spinner rack at the local drugstore. Just like buying whatever it was that we could get there. Then eventually, we're not so far. It was about 40 minutes to Edmonton. So once we clued into the fact that comic shops existed and that you could go to a place that sold only comics,
Mhm.
yeah, that really kind of changed our view of the thing. But for a while there, it was just the spinner rack, pretty limited. And I had I had two friends that also read comics. That was it. We had our little circle, and my brothers. My
Yeah.
brothers read comics, and my two friends at school, and we kind of swap our issues or whatever, and that was pretty much it. And if you would have told me at that time that the movie industry would have been taken over by Marvel Comics or whatever it is,
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't have believed you,
No.
A, and B, I would have been probably ecstatic.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I remember those spinner racks as well, and sometimes it had what the sale like the three comics in one little binder, but you couldn't see what the middle comic was.
yeah,
And you're like, oh, I
yeah,
gotta
yeah,
get.
yeah,
Then convincing your parents, I just need another quarter because you could buy it for a quarter.
yeah.
Do you
Or
still
so.
have comics from those days? Like, did you keep your collection?
Yeah, no, they're all stacked up in the studio here. Yeah, actually, I dug one of the ones up before the convention there the other day, and I was kind of it was from the spinner rack. It's got the date stamped on the cover, and yeah, I talked to one of the guys there to see how that would affect the value of a comic, and apparently it doesn't. Apparently, it's
Oh,
something that people look for. So
oh, really?
I
Oh,
was surprised to find that out.
but you don't plan to sell it though, right? I mean, you're gonna still keep it.
It'll probably just stay here in my pile of comics forever with with the rest of them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's just it. So, do you prefer working like still in hand, or do you do digital when you're doing like you still prefer the hand medium and then scanning it, or do you work?
So the first book that you have there, that was the first time that I worked entirely digitally. Was in that book. So from pencils through to the inking and everything was done on the computer.
Mhm.
And then from there, I kind of reverted back, but only half. So the way that I work is I'll do my thumbnails on paper.
Mhm.
So I can show you very quickly. Like my thumbnail page looks something like this, where I'll divide my 4 pages. I put myself notes here,
Mhm.
and I do all of that on paper with pencil. From there, I go into my digital software where I lay out the book and I do my roughs at full size. This is where I place all the dialogue, all the characters, all these types of things to make sure that it flows as a story. This is where I'll share with Daniel. I'll get my wife to read it. I'll get, a couple different people to read it to make sure that everything kind of holds up.
Mhm.
And then from there, I will do a cleaner pencil digitally, which I print up at full scale in non-photo blue.
Okay.
And then I ink on paper with ink and pens and all of that stuff and brush and ink and stuff because for the end result for that last drawing I really do like the physical pen on paper or brush on paper, the black on white. And the other kind of bonus is that at the end I have an actual piece of artwork,
Mhm.
like a finished page that I'm looking at. It's not just a digital piece of ones and zeros in a computer. So yeah, it's kind of really a hybrid system that I've adopted now. Yeah.
Nice. But I was gonna say, but you could sell the digital ones as an NFT.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not for me.
No. No, that's interesting. So, like I said, that's your happy medium. Then is half digital, half, and then finishing out the pen and paper, ink brush.
Yeah, and then digitally, I do add like the dot tones. Those are all added digitally as well.
Nice.
There remains a final digital touch where I'll go. Sometimes it's moving an eye 3 pixels to the right. Like small fine tuning things that
Yeah.
you can't do on a paper.
No.
Sometimes I'll do that digitally as well.
Oh, that's
And that probably most people would never notice, but yeah.
but you do. And then once you've noticed it, it just sticks with you every time you go to that page. It's like,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So going back to your X-Men, you said you liked X-Men. Who was your favorite? Because I know there's been a whole bunch of different types of X-Men. Who was your favorite X-Men when you're growing up?
So the favorite, probably Wolverine. It was so easy. He was Canadian. He's got this cool power set. He was just really cool. But I also really had a real soft spot for Gambit because my first X-Men comic was the comic where Gambit was introduced. So it's first appearance of Gambit. So I always had this kind of like emotional attachment to this character because I only bought that by accident off the spinner rack, and then realized afterwards that, oh, hey, this is where this character was introduced. So there's always kind of connection to Gambit, and also that he would sprinkle in French into his dialogue. As a kid who grew up, as a French-speaking kid in an English province, it was kind of fun to find that little reflection of spoken French. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he was from New Orleans, but yeah, he saw that the French, New Orleans French here and there. Is there anything like you would like to say to our small group of viewers, if there's any watching for who's thinking of going into the comic, they're like, hey, I think I know what to do for a comic. Is there any words of advice or wisdom or or don't do's that you have for anyone?
Basically, just know if you're looking to start doing comics, just know that it's a long task. To write and draw and get a comic made is and often very solitary. You got to be ready to be alone, working long hours. Like that said, it's extremely rewarding because at the end of the day, when the story's done, other than me and Daniel and an editor who corrected some mistakes or whatever, it's really our story that's out there. There aren't 100 people whose hands got into there or whatever it is. It really is a personal kind of object that you get to make, and you have that very direct connection to your readership. I feel like a lot of art, it has many steps between the intended audience and the person producing the art. I feel like comics are very close from the artist to the creator. So I think that's like something to be cherished in the medium. And then I would also probably warn people that it's not you don't go into it with the intent of making a ton of money. I mean, I'm not saying you can't make a ton of money. There are many examples of millionaire cartoonists out there. It exists, but it's not the way to go make a bunch of money, to be honest. So.
No, do it for love.
Yeah, and then after that, different doors will be open to you and different things will happen. But yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Marc. Merci beaucoup for joining us, and thank you, viewers. Like I said, all the links will be in the descriptions, and this may or may not come out in time. Probably won't be on time for the Gatineau one. But like Marc said, he's at different conventions. So if you happen to be in the city where one's there, drop by and give Marc a shout out.